One of the major issues for small businesses in South Africa is access to funding. The People's Fund, a crowdfunding initiative, started a few years ago to help small businesses access funding and government contracts, among others, has over the past 6 years outlaid 350 million rand in capital, and during that time the fund has helped over 2,000 small businesses and enabled R500 million in turnover for emerging businesses. SMMEs with purchase orders from corporate and government apply on the People's Fund platform to get capital to execute their orders. Now there's a new campaign where any ordinary South African can buy into the fund and own a share of its proceeds. And to find out more about how this works, we're joined by Luyanda Jafta, the CEO of the People's Fund. Luyanda, thank you very much for your time. It's been 6 years. You had this big dream where a number of businesses, as we know, in South Africa do get access to purchase orders, but they can't execute them because of access to funding.
100%.
You came up with this idea, the People's Fund, to help such businesses, small businesses, access funding, and then they pay it back. How has the business been in the past 6 years? Because businesses have contributed from as little as 100 rand all the way to 8 million rand in the past few years.
Yeah, so I think it's important, even when we describe us coming up with the business, that's an interesting way of putting it, because what happened actually was the market told us what it needed, you know. If you know, in the South African context, the Credit Act, especially for small businesses, regulates them in a similar way that it regulates individuals, which is not functional for somebody who's got a purchase order for 50,000, but has shown affordability of only 2,000 rand. So we said, how could you create a system that actually allows them to access capital without circumventing the laws, but at the same time telling the lawmakers that this is what you need to focus on, you know? And it's been a beautiful 6 years. We were actually one of the first companies on the Intergovernmental FinTech Working Group between the Prudential Authority, Financial Sector Conduct, and we're basically saying, listen, there is no robust law to govern how businesses access capital, you know, especially in the South African context, right? We figured out a method, right, by buying and reselling of the goods. And the market responded quite positively. I mean, we started this business with 3,000 rand 6 years ago as a business loan, and it's grown phenomenally from then, you know, like you mentioned. And the idea is still the same. We want people to participate in the change they want to see in the country. And that speaks to the campaign we're here to discuss today.
Before we get into the campaign, there are a lot of challenges facing small businesses today. And if you look back 6 years ago, the state of load shedding has led to many businesses shutting their doors. There's access to funding for energy. And there are other issues that are impeding growth for businesses, small businesses in particular. But we know that they are the biggest employer when it comes to those who have a job in South Africa, and unemployment is a problem. Seeing that you work with so many businesses, hundreds of businesses on a daily basis, what would you say are the top issues facing small businesses today?
Got you. I think the number one problem that we come across, right, is that businesses don't get spoken to as they are. They get spoken to as the institutions are, right? And why that is important as a concept is that most businesses don't need handouts, you know, like government in interaction with businesses, in chasing its votes or whatever we want to call it, right, likes to bring a culture of handouts, right? Most businesses say, I don't need your handouts. I need access to systems and processes that work, you know. So the number one impediment is access to capital. It's not grant funding, it's access to capital and working capital mechanisms so that I could do business more than I currently can with my cash flows. That's number one. Number two is access to markets, right? An ability to access viable markets. You know, like if you look at the South African context, we've got a historical context of the majority of the population being black people struggle to access the clients that they can grow from, right? And historically, government, even during apartheid, even before apartheid and all of those things, it always existed as a mechanism to enable the majority to participate in the broader economy and to bring them up by their bootstraps, right? Government spends $1 trillion a year on buying from businesses, right? Most people, the thing they don't know is less than 10% goes to emergent young black businesses from that spend, right? As an economy, it would be the 7th biggest economy on the continent. But we're underutilizing that mechanism to transform the country because, one, PR, 2, access to capital for people to actually execute on the purchase orders, and 3, people knowing how to actually participate, thinking that it's a nepotistic environment when there's actually open access systems that could actually enable us to hold government accountable and enable a greater participation of the South African populace in the economy.
And what most people don't realize is that small businesses do lose opportunities with those purchase orders that they receive from corporate South Africa and government because they do not have the funds to execute and see through those purchase orders. In your profile, you refer to yourselves as a conduit for a people-led economy. The solutions that you bring to the table for small businesses, talk us a little about what you've managed to do in the past 6 years.
Got you. The word conduit is very important to us, right? Our brand promise is change as is, right? Meaning people come to us as they are and they help us change the system as it is, right? And by us being a conduit, what we're primarily saying is that people are looking for opportunities and are striving to seek them, right? All we do is try to remove the barriers bit by bit, right? We are not the superheroes. We're the one who dresses the superhero, right? And the mechanism we've chosen thus far is purchase order funding, providing capital for people who've got orders with corporate and government, and providing the upfront capital so they can execute on the orders, and then we do a profit share when they get paid by those end clients, right? That's the first layer. 2 years ago, we trialed something, right? Because one of the things we saw was that there's a very low participation of people in the broader economy, which is tendering with government as well as with corporate. And we ran a trial in Randfontein where we were training people how to tender, right? And it was quite successful. And it became blaringly obvious to us that, we could create an army. I use the word army because it's a militant war on the economics, right?
Yes.
But we could train an army of people to be participants in the broader economy, right? Who don't have access or the information on how to do it, but we have seen how it gets done. Then we also provide the capital post that, because a lot of skills development programs leave small businesses or unemployed people out on the lurch after they've trained them with no access to opportunity. We're saying, listen, we'll teach you how to get the opportunity yourself so that you become self-sufficient and then provide the capital for it. So those are part of our interventions. And we've made our investors a bit of money as well in the process. COVID was tough. We did lose some money, but we stayed alive. I think that's the most important thing,
From a loan of 3,500 rand a couple of years ago to multi-million rand organization now. Now you are moving to the next step. There's a new campaign. We are opening up the fund for ordinary South Africans to buy a share in the work that you do. The world of investments is one which has a lot of mistrust with the jargon that is used. A lot of ordinary South Africans don't trust the capital markets. Explain to us this share buying into the People's Fund.
Got you.
How can ordinary people buy into it, and what will they get in return?
100%. I like how you started that sentence, that there's a very big mistrust, And what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months as the People's Fund is doing basically these interviews, like roadshows, right? Just explaining the basics of what our intentions are, right? So that an everyday person can participate, We've always been about changing the mechanism we think through finance. That's the number one thing. I think we could change a lot in this country if we changed how people interacted with finance without that fear that comes up, and that intimidation that comes, oh man, it's finance, right? So for us, it's basically simple. The name of the campaign is Asibe Grant, meaning let's be okay, right? But each of us can participate by owning a share in the People's Fund. So we're going public, right? And we're selling each share of the company for 1,000 rand. We're raising 200 million in total over the next 6 months. We've already raised 30 million, right? And our intention is pretty simple. Year on year, we want to grow the value of your share by 40%. each year, right? It's quite aggressive because we're a startup, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the period, we would have said we've won, right? If today you put in 1,000 rand, at the end of February 2020-30, your share is now worth 2,268, right? We would say we have won. That's the simple mechanism, right, of what do we want to give back and what do we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is train 20,000 unemployed youth and women to participate in the economy and outlay 5 billion in capital over that 6-year period.
When you say to train 20, part of this campaign is to train 20,000 young people to participate in the economy. It's one of the jargons that is used. Right. What does it mean? In actual fact, what are you going to be training them to do?
100%. So we're going to train them on how to tender. We're basically going to train them on how to tender. There's too little participation of the general youth and women in the tendering process, right? And the objective is quite simple. If we train you how to tender, we will be able to teach you the mechanisms to actually hold government accountable. If you remember 2 years ago, there was a case that went to the High Court, and basically that case said that it's unconstitutional to score on BEE ratings, right? A tender on BEE ratings. You know, like how that even got to the High Court, I think it even got to Constitutional Court, was just a tenderer looking at the tender process and holding government accountable. We want to instill that same thinking. You know, most people don't touch tendering because they're scared of corruption, as we say, right?
And in a way, it's been bastardized as tenderpreneurs, as if it's something bad.
As if it's something bad. And I think, like, to conscientize ourselves, especially as the black majority in South Africa, right? We're the one who uses the term of tenderpreneurs and the bastardization of that industry, right? When I tell you less than 10% of the tenders go to black-owned businesses, right? Who are the real tenderpreneurs? And what needs to change in our mindset, right? Who is incentivized to stop us from participating in the tendering process if 90% of the tenders do not go to black entrepreneurs and are not buying Porsches and are not buying all of these things? It's an important thing psychologically that we need to adopt and adapt to as South Africans, right? So that we can actually start seeing some real effects. Because the economy in South Africa is for the taking. And one of the things that we struggle with is an imposter syndrome. And what we need to break significantly is that imposter syndrome of participation in the broader South African economy.
Before I let you go, I'm an ordinary South African. I've got a little bit of money. I've heard you out in whatever platform. How do I get involved and actually buy into the People's Fund? Got you.
So it's quite simple on our platform. You go to our website. It's thepeople.co.za. So THEPEOPLE.co.za, Abantu, so thepeople.co.za.
Can you repeat that?
Thepeople.co.za.
Thepeople.co.za, okay.
Thepeople.co.za. And then you click on Own the People's Fund. It will walk you through a 3-step process, and then you'll be ready to own a share in the People's Fund.
Luyanda Jafta, the CEO at the People's Fund. Good luck to the future. And one of course, of the programs that are now available to ordinary South Africans that will be able to put some money down and see it grow over the years.